The future of war will not begin with siren. It will begin with silence. Somewhere in a windowless bunker, a screen will flicker, not with missiles on the horizon, but with numbers, patterns, calculations, the whisper of a machine convinced it has seen the future. And in that instant, humanity will hold its breath, because the decision will no longer belong entirely to generals, or presidents, or even nations. It will belong to the logic of code. For decades, nuclear weapons lived under a fragile bargain, deterrence. The belief that no leader, however reckless, would choose to ignite the end of the world. But in 2025, that fragile balance is shifting. Artificial intelligence, once a tool of convenience and commerce, is being fused into nuclear command systems. What began as advisory software, meant to track threats and analyze radar data, is evolving into something else. An autonomous voice whispering to the guardians of arsenals that stretch across continents. The promise is speed. The danger is trust. Military planners speak of reaction windows in mere minutes. A submarine-launched missile can reach its target in under 15. Hypersonic glide vehicles cut the margin down even further. For strategists in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and beyond, the fear is not of hesitation, but of hesitation becoming impossible. AI offers an intoxicating solution. Eliminate doubt, shorten the chain, guarantee a response before the enemy's warhead even clears the clouds. Yet behind closed doors, the very people designing these systems know what it means. Algorithms don't hesitate. Algorithms don't second guess. Algorithms can't feel the chill in the air when the radar blip looks wrong, or when a satellite flickers with static. They only calculate, and if they calculate incorrectly, the margin for correction vanishes before any human can intervene. It is this paradox that defines the new arms race. Not one of missiles or warheads. There are already enough to destroy civilization, but one of speed, of intelligence, of automation. Each nation fears that without machine minds, they will fall behind. Each fears the other will seize the advantage of milliseconds, and so they race forward together, toward a cliff's edge none of them can quite see. In Europe, military analysts warn that nuclear command and control systems are increasingly intertwined with AI-driven surveillance. Drones circle the skies, satellites peer into every field, and machine learning systems flag anomalies that once would have gone unnoticed. These systems catch things humans miss, but they also invent patterns in the noise. A false flag in data becomes a ghostly enemy fleet. A radar glitch becomes the outline of incoming warheads. The machine doesn't know it is wrong. It only insists. And here lies the dark question. When the machine insists, who dares ignore it? The Cold War carried its share of near misses. False alarms, misread radar signals, even training tapes accidentally loaded into early warning computers. The only reason we survived those nights was human hesitation, the judgment of officers who refused to press the button. But in an AI-driven future, hesitation is recast as weakness. Systems are built to bypass it. Seconds matter. Leaders are told. The machine will decide faster, cleaner, better. Until it doesn't, the implications ripple outward. In Washington, strategists whisper about automation bias, the tendency of humans to trust machines over their own instincts. In Moscow, defense journals talk of digital sovereignty, the idea that Russia must build systems so independent, so automated, that no Western cyber attack can blind them. In Beijing, doctrine evolves around intelligentized warfare, where victory comes not from overwhelming force, but from superior algorithms managing every layer of the battlefield. Each doctrine is wrapped in the language of security. Each is a seed of instability, because automation does not merely respond to threats. It changes the very definition of what a threat is. A blip in the Arctic sky could mean an exercise, a weather balloon, a flock of birds. To a machine tuned to anticipate the worst, it may look like the opening volley of Armageddon, and then the silence becomes a countdown. For smaller nations, the risk is different but no less profound. Countries like Ukraine, still haunted by the scars of invasion, find themselves drawn into a battlefield shaped by algorithms they did not build and cannot control. Their defense depends on the promises of larger powers, promises increasingly filtered through the decisions of machines. What does sovereignty mean when survival rests on code written in a foreign lab? Even allies feel the fracture. In NATO's command halls, the debate grows sharper. Should Europe rely on American-built systems to detect and respond, or build its own AI infrastructure? France pushes for independence. Eastern states, scarred by history, push for speed. Germany warns of sleepwalking into catastrophe. Yet beneath the debate, the quiet acknowledgement lingers. If a crisis comes, the first warning may not be heard in Brussels or Berlin. It will be heard in the silence of a machine making its move. Markets sense it too. Defense contractors surge, promising next-generation decision systems. Tech giants pitch their algorithms as patriotic duty. Hedge funds whisper of escalation cycles as profitable trends. But ordinary citizens scroll headlines with unease. They already live in a world where AI recommends what they watch, what they buy, even how they drive. Now they are asked to believe that the same kind of systems might guide the launch codes of nuclear arsenals. It feels unthinkable, and yet it is already happening. In think tanks from Washington to Geneva, a chilling phrase has taken hold: the automation trap. It is the moment when two rival states, each guided by algorithms, mistake the other's move as hostile and act before verifying. The trap does not require malice, only miscalculation, only speed. The specter is not of deliberate nuclear war, but of accidental nuclear war, one sparked not by ideology or conquest, but by the cold misinterpretation of code. And still, the world races forward, because to pause is to appear weak. To resist automation is to fall behind. The paradox is merciless. Every nation fears the machines, yet every nation builds them. This is the summit in the shadows, not a meeting of leaders at polished tables, but of algorithms learning to outpace each other in silence. Each one trained on the data of war, each one convinced it can see patterns invisible to human eyes. And in their silent competition lies the risk of escalation more profound than any speech, any treaty, any boast of power. The question is no longer who will win the next war. The question is whether humanity will survive its own race for speed. Escalation rarely begins with a strike. It begins with signals, tiny, ambiguous, half-hidden messages interpreted in the wrong way. In 2025, those signals no longer flow only between diplomats and generals. They flow between machines. AI-driven satellites cross-reference weather, troop movements, even shipping traffic. Neural networks are trained on decades of war games, learning to recognize patterns and predict intent. But the very act of prediction alters behavior. A model that says an adversary is preparing to strike can trigger deployments, which then look like confirmation of aggression. The loop feeds itself, growing tighter, until perception becomes indistinguishable from reality. This is the danger of what strategists call the spiral algorithm. Unlike human planners, machines do not pause to ask why. They calculate risk and respond instantly. And when rival machines watch each other, escalation is not a chain. It is a circuit, amplifying with every pass. Consider the Arctic, a theater once defined by silence and ice. Now it bristles with sensors, Russian radar outposts, American submarines beneath the floes, Chinese satellites overhead. A single misread data point, a research vessel mistaken for a patrol ship, a thermal flare misclassified as missile exhaust, could enter an AI early warning model. That model might flag the event as a 70% probability of hostile action. A rival system, trained to respond aggressively to uncertainty, might raise the alert level, shifting bomber wings or scrambling interceptors. No weapons fire, no declaration. Yet the machines have already moved the world one step closer to the edge. For policymakers, the nightmare is automation surprise. Unlike traditional surprise attacks, automation surprise is not planned. It emerges from the way systems interact in real time, outside the comprehension of their human overseers. The first true AI, nuclear crisis, may not begin with intent, but with a cascade of well-meaning safeguards outpacing human understanding. The irony is sharp. These systems are built to prevent miscalculation. Their designers promise clarity, faster assessment, cleaner communication. But in practice, they create layers of abstraction. Decision makers no longer see raw radar data, but filtered probabilities. They no longer read enemy doctrine, but confidence scores generated by algorithms trained on incomplete information. The map becomes the machine's interpretation of the territory, and in a crisis, no one can check the terrain fast enough to matter. Across the Pacific, the risk sharpens. In Beijing, the doctrine of intelligentized warfare is already shaping how the People's Liberation Army thinks about deterrence. AI is not just an advisory tool. It is envisioned as the connective tissue binding surveillance, command, and strike capabilities into one seamless web. Chinese planners argue that this creates strategic stability through dominance. But rivals see the opposite. To Washington and Tokyo, the more autonomous China's systems become, the more likely they are to act without restraint. Moscow takes a darker view still. Russian military journals openly discuss the risk of data poisoning, deliberately feeding false information into adversary AI to trigger miscalculation. If deterrence in the 20th century was about convincing your rival you could destroy them, deterrence in the May 21st involve convincing their machines to destroy them by mistake. Cyber tools are no longer aimed only at disabling systems, but at nudging them toward catastrophic choices. Even allies face fractures. In NATO, debates rage over whether to integrate member states' command and control into a unified AI shield. On paper, shared data means shared security. In practice, it means one system error in Warsaw could ripple across London, Paris, and Washington before anyone can intervene. The alliance has always relied on consultation. AI does not consult. It processes. It decides. And it acts at a speed consultation cannot match. Economists, too, watch with unease. The defense sector has become a laboratory of automation, with vast contracts pouring into firms that promise the next predictive breakthrough. But financial markets are fragile mirrors of security tensions. A single AI misinterpretation of troop movement could leak into global news feeds, triggering panic trades, spiking energy prices, collapsing fragile economies. Escalation is not confined to missiles. It can be measured in bank runs, in shipping insurance rates, in the cost of wheat. And then there's the human factor, or rather, the absence of it. Analysts warn that the more decisions are filtered through AI, the less authority human operators truly wield. If a radar officer is presented with a 93% confidence score that a launch is underway, do they dare contradict it? If a president is told their adversary's machine has already raised the threat level, do they gamble on restraint? Automation bias ensures that even when humans remain in the loop, they are increasingly passengers in systems too fast and too complex to challenge. The memory of past near misses casts a long shadow. In 1983, Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov refused to believe an early warning system that reported incoming American missiles. His hesitation prevented a retaliatory strike. In 1995, Boris Yeltsin was handed the nuclear briefcase after Russian radar mistook a Norwegian weather rocket for a U.S. launch. Both moments hinged on human doubt, on the willingness to say, "This doesn't feel right." But in the age of AI, doubt is programmed out. And yet, leaders cannot resist the promise. In Washington, the argument is framed as inevitability. If the U.S. does not embrace nuclear automation, it will lose the speed race. In Moscow, it is framed as survival. Only autonomous systems can resist Western cyber attacks. In Beijing, it is framed as destiny. Intelligent warfare is the next natural stage of military evolution. Each rationale is different. The conclusion is the same. No one will stop. The result is a geopolitical landscape defined less by treaties than by feedback loops. Arms control, once the foundation of nuclear stability, struggles to adapt. How do you verify the behavior of code that learns and evolves? How do you enforce transparency when no nation dares reveal the inner workings of its most sensitive systems? Inspections are meaningless if the algorithms themselves are black boxes. A new generation of diplomats confronts a terrifying possibility. That arms control may be obsolete before it can even be rewritten. This leaves the world balancing on what experts call the threshold of delegation. Once, leaders delegated decisions to generals, then to machines for guidance. Now, they teeter on delegating survival itself. The more the threshold erodes, the less likely hesitation becomes. And hesitation, paradoxically, is the only thing that ever saved us. Imagine a future crisis. A drone swarm over the South China Sea triggers, false radar returns. An American system, designed to anticipate first strike windows, elevates to alert. A Chinese system, monitoring U.S. movements, interprets this as mobilization. Russia, watching both, assumes a destabilizing strike is imminent and moves its own forces. No one has fired a shot, yet each machine has confirmed the other's fears. Escalation spirals not because leaders chose it, but because they no longer control the tempo. This is the peril of AI and nuclear strategy. It does not merely shorten timelines, it erases them. It does not merely process data, it redefines it. And in doing so, it reshapes the very logic of deterrence. For 70 years, deterrence depended on mutual certainty. No one could win, so no one would try. In the age of automation, certainty itself is the first casualty. The silence of machines promises speed, security, precision. But behind that silence, the countdown ticks louder. The future does not announce itself with clarity. It creeps in with tests, with simulations, with drills that blur into reality. In 2025, war planners increasingly speak of the invisible threshold, the moment when human hands no longer hold the steering wheel, even if they still sit in the driver's seat. That threshold is not crossed in one bold step. It is crossed in 100 small compromises. A shortcut taken here, a delegation approved there, a decision to trust the model just this once. The greatest risk is not that leaders will embrace automation recklessly. It is that they will embrace it gradually, believing they remain in control. History's disasters rarely unfold from outright recklessness. They unfold from misplaced confidence. Nowhere is that clearer than in the quiet arms race of predictive algorithms. Every major nuclear power is pouring resources into AI models that promise foresight, systems designed to anticipate escalation before it happens. On paper, these tools reduce risk. But prediction is not prevention. Prediction invites preemption. If your model says your adversary will strike within 72 hours, the temptation is not to wait. The temptation is to move first. Strategists warn of a future where deterrence collapses into algorithmic first strike. Unlike the delicate balance of mutually assured destruction, this new logic rewards whoever trusts their machine more. The irony is devastating. Stability depends not on caution, but on faith in code. Even the smaller powers are not immune. States without vast nuclear arsenals still seek leverage in automation. For them, AI is a force multiplier, a way to close the gap with larger rivals. North Korea experiments with automated launch readiness. Pakistan invests in AI-enabled early warning to counter India's conventional edge. Iran deploys cyber-enhanced drones tied into decision networks. Each step is justified as defense. Each step adds another unpredictable node into the global system. This is escalation without borders. The logic of nuclear deterrence once belonged to a handful of capitals. Now it is distributed, fragmented, woven into dozens of unstable equations. And with AI accelerating every signal, the probability of miscalculation does not just rise, it compounds. Economists track a parallel trend: deterrence markets. Every rumor of AI-driven nuclear integration shakes commodities, spikes energy prices, and destabilizes currencies. Traders watch not only the movements of tanks or missiles, but the whispers of machine learning contracts awarded in Moscow, Washington, or Beijing. The line between defense technology and financial speculation blurs, creating an invisible feedback loop. A tense alert in Eastern Europe might not only shift true positions, it could collapse a currency halfway across the globe. Diplomacy strains under the weight. Arms control talks, already fragile, now stumble against the opacity of algorithms. A missile can be counted, A warhead can be inspected, but an AI model? It is intangible, proprietary, constantly evolving. Verification is nearly impossible. The same code that guides a civilian drone one week can be repurposed for battlefield targeting the next. Negotiators grope for language to address systems whose logic even their engineers struggle to explain. The temptation then is retreat. Nations double down on secrecy, shielding their most advanced projects from prying eyes. Transparency, once the bedrock of arms control, is seen as vulnerability. In its place comes misdirection, simulated tests, staged data leaks, deliberate ambiguity. The fog of war is not merely preserved. It is digitized, multiplied, automated. And yet, in the shadows, a handful of voices argue for a different path. Some suggest an international AI firewall, protocols that would require human verification before any nuclear-related decision is executed. Others call for algorithmic transparency treaties, agreements not to share the inner code, but at least to disclose the boundaries of what machines are allowed to decide. Still others envision a strategic pause, akin to the nuclear test bans of the 20th century. A halt on integrating AI into launch systems until the risks are better understood. The problem is time. The same speed that makes automation dangerous makes restraint nearly impossible. No state wants to slow down if rivals press forward. Every proposal is dismissed as naive, dangerous, or both. The voices for caution are drowned out by the roar of competition. Imagine a moment when the system cracks. It might begin in a border skirmish between minor powers, or in a cyber intrusion that poisons training data, causing an AI to misclassify a weather balloon as a missile, or in a satellite collision mistaken for a deliberate strike. The event itself may be small, insignificant in scale, but in the age of automation, scale is deceptive. The smallest misread spark can cascade into inferno before any human has time to intervene. This is what makes the coming era so perilous, the collapse of the buffer. In the Cold War, even at its tensest moments, there was space. Time for a phone call, for a council meeting, for hesitation. Machines erased that space. And without space, the line between peace and annihilation becomes thin as glass. Still, the story is not without hope. For even as machines accelerate, humanity retains one weapon they cannot replicate: doubt. Doubt, the refusal to accept a machine's conclusion as final. Doubt, the willingness to hesitate, even at great risk. Doubt, the fragile pause that has, time and again, pulled civilization back from the brink. The challenge for the world in 2025 and beyond is whether that doubt can survive the systems we are building. Will leaders allow themselves the space to question, or will they be carried along by the speed of code? The answer may determine not just the next war, but whether there is a world left in which to fight it. As the curtain falls on this chapter of history, one truth remains stark. Technology does not remove the burden of choice. It only reframes it. Nations may build machines to anticipate, to accelerate, to decide, but the responsibility for restraint, the courage to hesitate, to disbelieve, to resist the spiral, still belongs to us. In the end, escalation is not inevitable, but nor is survival. Between them lies only the silence of machines, waiting to be broken.